Hello guys, we are picking up today with the end of our story. Can you believe we've reached the end finally? So where we left off, Aslan and his army won the battle against the White Witch, and Aslan defeated the White Witch, and they all went to Cair Paravel and crowned the 4 children on the 4 thrones of Cair Paravel, and that is where we left off. But amid all these rejoicings, Aslan himself quietly slipped away. And when the kings and queens noticed that he wasn't there, they said nothing about it. For Mr. Beaver had warned them. "He'll be coming and going," he had said. "One day you'll see him and another you won't. He doesn't like being tied down, and of course he has other countries to attend to. It's quite all right. He'll often drop in, only you mustn't press him. He's wild, you know, not like a tame lion." And now, as you see, this story is nearly, but not quite, at an end. These 2 kings and 2 queens governed Narnia well, and long and happy was their reign. At first, much of their time was spent in seeking out the remnants of the White Witch's army and destroying them. And indeed, for a long time, there would be news of evil things lurking in the wilder parts of the forest. A haunting here and a killing there, a glimpse of a werewolf one month, and the rumor of a hag the next. But in the end, all that foul brood was stamped out. And they made good laws and kept the peace and saved good trees from being unnecessarily cut down, and liberated young dwarves and young satyrs from being sent to school, and generally stopped busybodies and interferers, and encouraged ordinary people who wanted to live and let live. And they drove back the fierce giants, quite a different sort from Giant Rumblebuffin, on the north of Narnia when these ventured across the frontier. And they entered into friendship and alliance with countries beyond the sea and paid them visits of state and received visits of state from them. And they themselves grew and changed as the years passed over them. And Peter became a tall and deep-chested man and a great warrior, and he was called King Peter the Magnificent. And Susan grew into a tall and gracious woman with black hair that fell almost to her feet. And the kings of the countries beyond the sea began to send ambassadors asking for her hand in marriage. And she was called Susan the Gentle. Edmund was a graver and quieter man than Peter, and great in counsel and judgment. He was called King Edmund the Just. But as for Lucy, she was always gay and golden-hearted and golden-haired, and all princes in those parts desired her to be their queen, and her own people called her Queen Lucy the Valiant. So they lived in great joy, and if ever they remembered their life in this world, it was only as one remembers a dream. And one year it fell out that Tumnus, who was a middle-aged fawn by now and beginning to be stout, came down river and brought them news that the white stag had once more appeared in his parts. The white stag who would give you wishes if you caught him. So these 2 kings and 2 queens, with their principal members of their court, rode a-hunting with horns and hounds in the western woods to follow the white stag. And they had not hunted long before they had a sight of him. And he led them a great pace over rough and smooth and through thick and thin, till the horses of all the courtiers were tired out, and only these 4 were still following. And then they saw the stag enter into a thicket where their horses could not follow. Then said King Peter, for they talked in quite a different style now, having been kings and queens for so long, "Fair consorts, let us now alight from our horses and follow this beast into the thicket, for in all my days I never hunted a nobler quarry." "Sir," said the others, "even so let us do." So they alighted and tied their horses to trees and went on into the thick wood on foot. And as soon as they had entered it, Queen Susan said, "Fair friends, here is a great marvel, for I seem to see a tree of iron." "Madam," said King Edmund, "if you look well upon it, you shall see it is a pillar of iron with a lantern set on the top thereof." Okay, what do you think they're talking about here? So they've gotten off their horses and they're walking. Do you see where they're pointing? Susan said, "Is that a tree made of iron?" And Edmund said, "No, it's not a tree, it's a pillar of iron." Do you recognize it? Could that be the lamppost? That's kind of what it looks like to me. Let's find out. "By the lion's mane, a strange device," said King Peter, "to set a lantern here where the trees cluster so thick about it and so high above it that if it were lit it should give light to no man." "Sir," said Queen Lucy, "by likelihood when this post and this lamp were set here, there were smaller trees in the place, or fewer or none. For this is a young wood, and the iron post is old." And they stood looking upon it. Then said King Edmund, "I know not how it is, but this lamp on the post worketh upon me strangely. It runs in my mind that I have seen the like before, as it were in a dream, or in the dream of a dream." "Sir," answered they all, "it is even so with us also." "And more," said Queen Lucy, "for it will not go out of my mind that if we pass this post and lantern, either we shall find strange adventures, or else some great change of our fortunes." "Madam," said King Edmund, "the like foreboding stirreth in my heart also." "And in mine, fair brother." "And in mine too," said Queen Susan. "Wherefore by my counsel we shall lightly return to our horses and follow this white stag no further." "Madam," said King Peter, "therein I pray thee to have me excused, for never, since we four were kings and queens in Narnia, have we set our hands to any high matter as battles, quests, feats of arms, acts of justice, and the like, and then given over. But always what we have taken in hand, the same we have achieved." "Sister," said Queen Lucy, "my royal brother speaks rightly, and it seems to me we should be shamed if for any fearing or foreboding we turned back from following so noble a beast as now we have in chase." "And so say I," said King Edmund, "and I have such desire to find the signification of this thing that I would not by my good will turn back for the richest jewel in all Narnia and all the islands." "Then in the name of Aslan," said Queen Susan, "if you will all have it so, let us go on and take the adventure that shall fall to us." So these kings and queens entered the thicket, and before they had gone a score of paces, they all remembered that the thing that they had seen was called a lamp post. And before they had gone 20 more, they noticed that they were making their way not through branches, but through coats. And next moment, they all came tumbling out of a wardrobe door into the empty room, and they were no longer kings and queens in their hunting array, but just Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy in their old clothes. It was the same day and the same hour of the day on which they had all gone into the wardrobe to hide. Mrs. Macready and the visitors were still talking in the passage, but luckily they never came into the empty room, so the children weren't caught. And that would have been the very end of the story if it hadn't been that they felt they really must explain to the professor why 4 of the coats out of his wardrobe were missing. And the professor, who was a very remarkable man, didn't tell them not to be silly or not to tell lies, but believed the whole story. Look at what is happening. They were following the white stag into the forest, and they passed by the lamppost, and where did they end up? Back through the wardrobe. And they've just told the professor, and he says, "No," he said, "I don't think it would be any good trying to go back through the wardrobe door to get the coats. You won't get into Narnia again by that route. Nor would the coats be much use now if you did, huh? What's that? Yes, of course you'll get back to Narnia again someday. Once a king in Narnia, always a king in Narnia. But don't go trying to use the same route twice. Indeed, don't try to get there at all. It'll happen when you're not looking for it. And don't talk too much about it, even amongst yourselves. And don't mention it to anyone else unless you find that they've had adventures of the same sort themselves. What's that? How will you know? Oh, you'll know all right. Odd things, they say. Even their looks will let the secret out. Keep your eyes open. Bless me, what do they teach them at these schools?" And that is the very end of the adventure of the wardrobe. But if the professor was right, it was only the beginning of the adventures in Narnia. And that, my friends, is the end of our book. Can you believe it? I want you to think on that tonight. And think about the story, think about what you listened to, what you read, think about your favorite part, or maybe you have more than one favorite part, think about your favorite parts. And then also start thinking about what we should read next. We can talk about that on Friday. I have a couple of ideas, and maybe we can vote on it. So I am so glad you were able to join me on this adventure. Isn't reading such an adventure? And I hope I will see you again soon. Have a great day.